and welcome to another episode of the Digital Access Show. Again, like a number of shows, I've said I've been wanting to interview this guy for quite a while. Now, Santiago Valesquez, is that, I've pronounced it correctly, have I, Santi?
Velasquez, but don't
Velasquez,
worry.
yep, sorry, is based here in Brisbane. He's originally from Colombia. And he's doing some really innovative stuff in the accessibility area. And that's why it's important for people to meet Santi and hear what he's got to say and talk about what he's doing. Because Santi, I'm having one of those days. Santi actually has lived experience himself. So I'm going to let Santi tell you about himself. So everyone, please meet Santi Velasquez.
Anorel, again, thank you very much for having me. It's an absolute pleasure to be here. And so as you said, originally from Colombia, and from a very young age, I always loved technology, and I figured that it can be used to improve our world, but it needs to be done appropriately. And what that led me to was to develop a system called Halo to improve public transport accessibility. So in a nutshell, I was frustrated that because I couldn't see a bus, because my guide dog tray couldn't tell me which bus it was, or because, I move around and each bus stop is different, oftentimes I would be left behind. And that's just not acceptable. And oftentimes, even if I get on the bus, I would get dropped off at the incorrect stop. And we can keep going down this list of inaccessibility with public transport. And I thought, no, let's fix it. So we came up with Halo, and Halo is basically a system that allows you as a commuter, doesn't matter your disability, to rock up to a bus stop, a train stop, a ferry stop, and select the vehicle you want to get on and select where you want to get off. And you basically are sending an electronic hail to the bus driver, train conductor, so that when they get to your stop, or actually one stop before, they know you need to get on at the next stop. Nobody's going to be hailing, and you might have, if you choose to share your access requirements, they will also know, they use a guide dog, they use a wheelchair, with the whole objective of making public transport just better. We're not allowed to drive. Surprise, surprise.
Yeah, I don't know what their problem is. Driverless cars are coming. We keep
They
getting
are indeed.
calls.
They are indeed.
Yeah.
And not only that, we're not allowed to drive, but I don't know many people that have $100+ a day, or $50 a day, or $20 a day, even to just catch taxis and Ubers, even with subsidies from NDIS, from state government. It doesn't really matter. So I figured, well, public transport just has to work. So that's where Halo came from. And I figured, if nobody else is going to do it, and I can, why not?
Yeah. Santi, what were you using before Halo? What were the tools you were using that weren't helping you?
Honestly, I tried everything. I would stand at the bus stop and just wave my hand just constantly. I would use my phone and just try to time the hails appropriately. I would wave my cane in front of buses where it was very busy to make sure that everybody would stop. I had the little books that you would flip the numbers for. I tried everything. And when you get on the bus, you obviously ask the bus driver, hey, can you let me know when we get to stop number 7? And Google Maps, Apple Maps, everything. And the system just didn't work. Obviously, I also called up in advance, and they said, oh, tomorrow I'm catching bus here to there. Could you let that driver know? And the difficult part is, it's not the driver's fault. It's just the infrastructure. It hasn't been designed to help people with disabilities, and it hasn't been designed to help drivers, because they don't have an easy job already as it is. And now we're just asking them to do more. So it's not a well-designed system.
Yeah, I actually agree with you, because obviously I live in Brisbane, and for me, there's a couple of streets that I've learned I'd rather walk an extra half hour and go and catch a ferry to get where I need to go, and take twice as long than try and catch a bus, because you just can't do it. It physically is an impossibility. And also the number of times that, like you, the bus thinks there's not going to be anyone at the bus stop, so they just keep cruising. And then suddenly there's someone there. Well, they've already passed it. They can't stop in time, otherwise they'd be causing accidents and all these things. Bus drivers don't have an easy job.
Well, last year I was fortunate to travel around the world on a Churchill Fellowship,
Mm.
and I visited 11 different countries, upwards of 25 major cities, looking at their public transport infrastructure. And two things stood out to me. Every city does public transport a little bit differently,
Yes.
but it doesn't matter where you are. The problems are exactly the same. So in Berlin, for example, a bus, and in Japan, a bus is supposed to stop for you if you're at the bus stop,
Mm.
regardless of whether you hail or not. It's not, you don't have to hail them.
Yeah.
And I thought, great, that's fantastic. That's brilliant. Let's do that. I just have to stand there and great. Now, the funny thing about what happened in Berlin is that I didn't know that there was a tree in front of the bus stop. So I just stood
Mm.
at the bus stop. That's where it was. And
Yep.
we thought we would try it. And the bus went by because I didn't know that I was standing in front of the tree. So by the time that the
Mm.
bus would have seen me, he would
Yeah.
have been past the bus stop. And it's like, I can't reverse.
Yeah.
And it was surprising because when I gave a lecture at TU Berlin, the University of Technology Berlin, people thought, oh no, this doesn't happen here because we don't have to hail a bus. And I'm like, well, actually, how about this story from yesterday? And they
Yeah.
were all surprised because, again, lived experience, it's extremely important.
Yeah.
So when we develop something, it doesn't look accessible, it is accessible.
Yeah. So, what has been the response from government here in Australia, from the people that like TransLink here in Queensland? What has been the response?
Honestly, the response is mixed. So
Yeah.
drivers love it. We have piloted Halo in New South Wales, and the feedback has been, this is great. Just make it
Yeah.
available to everybody.
Yeah.
We get the appropriate information, we get it on time, and brilliant.
Yeah.
Depot managers say this means less complaints for us, and we just provide better service.
Yeah.
The issue is the people who approve budgets. To them, they don't see the issue. They're like, oh, is this genuinely an issue? Or
Mm.
if they know the issue, they're like, oh, we just don't have funding for this.
Yeah.
So, we did a pilot in New South Wales for Halo, and it was a 3-month pilot. It was in Tweed Heads, in Queanbeyan, and in the Beeline in Sydney.
Yeah.
And we learned lots. But the Transport for New South Wales at the beginning didn't allow us to talk about it. We said we got to publicize it because that way people will know. And they're like, oh, just talk to Guide Dogs and Vision Australia and Blind
Mm.
Citizens Australia and just do it that way. And we're like, okay, we can do that. That's no problem. But we need to go broader than them.
Yeah.
Um, and then it wasn't up until we were doing the trial that they realized, well, we don't have enough people.
Mm.
We had probably 20, 30 people, and they're like, why don't we have more? And we're like, because people can't try something that they don't know about.
Yeah.
And going down that same road, it's really hard to see that there are more progressive governments overseas with worse public transport systems
Mm.
than we have in Australia, but they're more progressive because they have an accessibility team and the people who are making those decisions have lived experience. So, for example, again, using New South Wales as an example, they don't have an accessibility team running
Mm.
anything in Transport for New South Wales. Queensland has one, and we've been trying to approach them because, hey, it's Brisbane, and they're like, we'll get to you, no worries.
Yeah.
We have had more progress overseas, which is sad, but it's fantastic.
It is. One of the things that I'm agreeing with you, because people don't know what they don't know. I was in a meeting last week with it was some people from a government department, and they were telling me how they were accessible and da da da. And I'll be honest, it was the Queensland government department. And they said, "Oh, you'd use this," and I said, "Actually, I don't." And they said, "Why?" I said, "Most people with vision impairment don't use it." A classic, okay, is TransLink. Do you use the TransLink app? I
No,
don't.
the fact that it's a containerized website makes
Mm.
it terribly inaccessible.
Exactly. And I said the same thing, and they said, "Well, what do you use?" And I said, "Well, we use Google Maps, we'll use Apple Maps, we'll use like Blind Square." So there's tools that we use that people don't know about. And they said, "But we didn't know about these tools." And I said, "Well, get people." I felt like saying, just get people with lived experience in. You know, for anything with accessibility, digital accessibility, physical accessibility, people with the lived experience are the ones because they're living it daily.
The biggest thing that I would love for people to know, regardless of where you are, right? A lot of
Mm,
people say, oh, accessibility is just a chore. We have to comply with
yeah.
the rules and it's expensive. It's like people who have a disability are the best and most loyal customers
Mm,
because we don't have a lot of options, right? It's not like when we find something that works, we will stick by it
yeah.
until the day we die. Now, that's not the only reason, right? It's good for business. But
Mm,
the key thing that I also need people to know is it's important to have lived experience, but it's also important to be able to communicate how that translates into properly designing products. And
yes.
not everybody can do that. So one of the things we have found is when I've done some consultancy in the past for governments and overseas, I've done some stuff for Sonos, some stuff for the UN and whatnot.
Mm,
Oftentimes they say, oh, we have heard that this is an issue. Our website is not accessible here or it's not accessible there. But developers don't know how to fix that. And the reason why sometimes they don't know how to fix that is because at universities, we don't get taught that there's
that's
no
what it is.
teaching about that. So
Yeah.
unless you pick a master's degree on digital accessibility in 4 or 5 universities across the world, you know about the web accessibility standards, and that's
Mm,
fantastic. That's a great start. But the nitty-gritty of, oh, there is a difference between writing an app in React Native or Flutter, and how do you do accessibility labels so that the button and the label are read at the same time
yeah.
by a screen reader? That is not known. It's very hard. And as a user, it's very difficult for you with lived experience to be expected to know, hey, this button, the label and the button aren't combined, therefore that's why it sounds this way.
Yeah.
And that's where we find the issues.
I
People just
agree.
don't know. They just don't know.
They don't know. And I look back to when I initially did uni, and it was actually way before the WCAG standards. And I mean, the internet wasn't even developed then. So, I mean, we're talking the 80s when I initially did uni. So the progress of technology has been so quick to the point now where they're talking about how AI is going to solve the issue. And I keep saying it's not going to fully solve the issue. It can't because people use the tools. The moment you add that people factor in, you know, it becomes an exponential problem, doesn't it? Because everyone will do something in a slightly different way. That means it may not be accessible. You can try and aim for the most, but I do think it should be the basis of every uni course now that a document structure
Well, not only
is
that,
taught and people know how to apply the document structure.
absolutely, absolutely. And there are very basic things that you can do to make things accessible. You know,
Mm,
use the accessibility checker in Microsoft Word. If you're working with
yeah.
Microsoft Word, make sure that you do alt text and images. I'm not saying go 110% because you might
No,
not know how to do that. And it's not the responsibility of one person within a team, it's the
exactly.
responsibility of the company or the
Yes.
organization. But another factor, and it's interesting you bringing up AI when it comes to accessibility, the AI models, they get trained on a lot, whether it's a large language model or a large function model, whatever type of model, you get so many models. Um, we have to also make sure that as people with disabilities, we are involved in the training of said models to make sure that there are no biases when those models are being trained. Because I can
Yes.
guarantee you right now that if I were to sample a group of 150 people just on the street randomly, again, not a perfect scientific study,
Yes.
but if I were to sample them and say, what's the likelihood that I can cook a really good steak? Most people that have never dealt with disabilities, they will say you're blind, you will just burn yourself, let alone burning the whole house down.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying I'm a perfect chef, but I can feed people, and
Yeah.
I like how my steaks turns out, right? Little things like that can, if not dealt with appropriately, can mean that in the future, if we are relying on whatever model for artificial intelligence, if we don't take care of the biases, the model might say, oh, don't worry about it. Let's just call a volunteer. You can't
Mm.
read that, or you shouldn't walk down that street, or whatever it is that
Yeah.
it's helpful with.
Yeah, and that's it. And I suppose the one thing for me, I keep saying to people, never make an assumption. when you're sending an email, don't make an assumption that the person at the other end can read it in exactly the same way as you. Everyone's different.
Absolutely.
Whether,
And just ask, right? Just
hmm,
ask. If you don't know, and
yes,
if you genuinely don't know, I know that I'd love to, oh, absolutely. Let me show you. Yeah. I
yeah.
know that there are some people that don't like that. I know that some people just assume that people should know how their disability works and whatnot. I don't think that's fair, but each to their own. And to be fair, most people, when they realize, oh, I can ask, they're really comfortable. They're like, wow, that's cool. But if you don't ask, you don't know.
And the other thing, it is also, I think, incumbent on people with disability to actually take that breath and not be cranky if someone asks the question. Yeah, you do have your off days, but the more we talk about our disabilities and the ways that we've used it as an opportunity, because it is an opportunity
Absolutely.
to
Absolutely.
learn something different, the better off the whole of society is, really.
It's the world isn't going to change overnight, and we know
No.
that. But slowly, slowly, and slowly, we will make changes that in 20 years' time, in 50 years' time, whenever it is, we will say, you know what? I remember when I was young and I couldn't do X, Y, Z. I
Mm.
remember when the iPhone first came out, I'm like, oh, I wonder how I'm going to be able to use that. iOS didn't have a screen reader on iOS 1, right?
Mm.
And then now, if you ask anybody, what phone would you get for accessibility reasons only? iPhones are at the top of the list. Android is
Yep.
good, but iPhone, there is no arguing that Apple does very good accessibility, right?
They do great
Um,
accessibility. Yeah.
Correct. So it's all these things that slowly but surely we can change and we can make things accessible. And a big change might be big for you, but might be minuscule for somebody else. And
Yeah.
the impact might be immense regardless.
And with Halo, I can see such a need, not just for people with disability, the elderly. Oh gosh, that mum with two or three kids. All those people, the difference it will make to people's lives in the pouring rain when we have these big storms here that we get in Queensland. There's so many times that you could see where having such a simple tool, it probably took a lot to develop, but a simple tool can make a big change to society, just like the typewriter did, just like Siri did, just like there's so many captions. Look at the difference that captions make. It's a
Well,
simple tool, but it's used by many people.
for me and for the team, the biggest thing that always comes to our mind when I started my company, I said we have to develop something that isn't going to be a niche product and will help everybody.
Yeah.
Precisely so that A, it didn't become extremely expensive,
Yep.
and B, it would be able to be used anywhere. And you're correct, right? If you don't speak the language, how do you ask the bus driver, can you please
Yes,
let me know when we get to this stage? If you're a child,
exactly.
is much easier to just say, I'm getting on this bus, getting off there.
Mm.
If you have a mobility impairment, and if you want to tell the bus driver, hey, I need a wheelchair ramp when you stop,
Yep.
if you're getting on and off the train, and again, you need a ramp, if you're a parent, if you're visiting a new city, it doesn't really matter
Yep.
why. That's why we did it. That's why, and this is the key thing that we're talking to with transport agencies
Mm.
and this all the governments. I'm not trying to I'm not trying to scam you. I'm
Mm.
trying to save you money because at the moment, the NDIS spends 700 plus million dollars on literally transport subsidies alone. I'm not saying everybody will be able to use public transport, but when you imagine that we're spending upwards of $50 an hour for somebody to drive us around, that's insane. Not many people get that. And
That's it.
if we weren't a developed nation with lots of money, that wouldn't happen. And
Yeah.
Queensland or New South Wales, Victoria, they spend upwards of $30 million a year on just taxi subsidies alone. So you keep adding that, and that's roughly, nearly $1 billion on
Yeah.
subsidies that they help a lot. I use them sometimes, absolutely. And I know that there are a lot of people who might be listening who use that here in Australia. And I'm sure that there are things similar to that in other countries, but that's not sustainable. What if you want to catch up with your friends after work? What if you can't call a support worker?
Mhm.
It's just not sustainable.
Oh, I agree. So, what's the future for Halo? what's next?
What's next?
How can everyone listening help? Because
Two
it is
simple
going to help us
things.
all. Yeah.
Two simple things. If you want Halo in your area, go to our website or
Yep.
email us at info@halo.co, and Halo is
Mhm.
HAILO.co, and send us an email. Say, hey, I'm in this area. Please, I would like Halo, because we can use that data to go to government and say, hey, people do want that. And the
Yeah.
second portion is, if you work in the transport industry, if you work in government, if you work in anywhere that has a hand in public transport infrastructure, get in
Mhm.
touch with us. We are trying to improve public transport for everybody, for drivers to be more efficient, for passengers to use public transport more often, to be more engaged, and just for the general public. If you see more people with disabilities out and about and they're working, the general society benefits. And if we, as people with disabilities, go out and about more often, then we benefit.
Yeah, yeah. I'm not even asking for a takeaway. You've just said it so brilliantly, Santi. Santi, how can people get in contact with you yourself if they want to find out more about what you're doing and it's actually a remarkable journey that you've done so far, and you've only just started. So how can people find out about you?
Simple. So obviously our Halo website, and it's we're about to update the website. It's going to be all nice and much prettier. And don't worry, it's all accessible.
Oh,
I
thank
tested
you.
myself.
Thank you. Have you
Um,
tested everything for
absolutely.
all the WCAG?
Oh man, don't get me started with that. Absolutely. And we're
Wonderful.
trying to go above and beyond WCAG, because yes, there are 13. I digress. That's a whole other
That's
podcast. We can have a
another
chat.
podcast. Yep.
But absolutely. So Halo, HAILO.co,
Hmm.
and then info@halo.co, and then
Yep.
follow me on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is my most used platform, Santiago Valesquez. And again, hoping that we can add show notes at the end, and I'll share my links to all of this stuff. And if you do want to reach out to me, LinkedIn is probably the best way, just because the platform that I post or use the most. And if I can help in any way, anybody, uh, and or if you want to help, please do reach out.
Yeah, look, I can only encourage everyone because it is something that's going to help the whole of society and not just in more efficient public transport. We're talking better use of money. You
Oh,
know, if
absolutely.
that $1 billion is not getting used, even if half of the $1 billion is not getting used in public transport, it can be used elsewhere to provide other resources for society.
Mm,
So Santi, thank you. Thank you for giving us your time. So this is Santi Velasquez from Halo. And yeah, you will find the how to contact Santi at the end of the video. We always like to add that. And I can only encourage everyone, go and find out about Halo because Santi, I want Halo. I would seriously love Halo after my experiences last week because I'm like
no,
you. I have a severe vision impairment and getting on a bus is no fun. So
no.
thanks again.
Thank you, Norel, for the invitation. I'm looking forward to connecting with more people. And
Yeah,
again, I'll bring Halo to the whole of Australia. We will change public transport around the world so that
fantastic.
anybody can use it.
Yeah, so this is the latest episode of the Digital Access Show. Look, please like, subscribe, share it with everyone, tell everyone, because we are about how to help the community understand about digital accessibility, physical accessibility, and the opportunities that people with disability have that, yeah, some normal people will never get. Just because we can't see properly or we can't hear properly or whatever it is, we're everywhere. We're like, so we're pretty common. You can find us all around the world. And after all, a figure I heard the other day in US dollars, people with disability in the world have 6 trillion spending dollars.
Yeah,
So there you
actually, we would be the third largest economy in the world.
oh yeah, we would too.
Yeah,
So
we're
yeah,
pretty
come
big.
and join. We are a big economy. So we'll see you next time. And thanks again, Santi.
Thank you.